Welcome to Ritual Scale Modeling. This is part 13 of Tamiya's US aircraft carrier Enterprise CVN65. The scale is 1 to 350. In this part, I'm going to be carrying on building the island. So let's jump into this and see how well I get on. So I'm starting where I left off, and I'm placing on the top part of the flight control center, which I built the sub-assembly in the previous part of this video series, part 12. And just as a recap to remind you, the windows have been filled in with using crystal clear cement. That's the white canopy glue, just to give that window look. And then I'm going over it with Humbrol 127 US Ghost Grey, just to touch up any paintwork that's been damaged through the build process. This little platform is meant to go on separately, but it actually builds up on top of each other. I decided to sub-assemble it, and instead of building it onto the model, it just made more sense to me to have it all in place before placing it on. So while that's drying, I'm going on to the low altitude warning system. They look like lights really, but they're just part of the radar system, and each one, there's 3 in total, and each one has its own little platform to sit on. Each platform is a slightly different angle, which will reflect to the positioning on the tower itself. And while that's drying, I'm jumping slightly ahead to build up the main mast. So these components were made up in part 12. These little radar and platforms. They're self-explanatory how they go on. Each location point on the mast is really well defined, and it's quite a nice tight fit as well. So you won't have to worry about getting them in position. Once they click onto it, they're not going to go anywhere. Even though there's a lot of components to this mast, the sub-assemblies on each little platform makes it quite easy to build up the entire unit. And I'm just working my way from the bottom up towards the top and placing each platform or sub-assembly part on. It's still delicate work, however. Just be careful when you're doing it. You're not going to bend things out of shape. And if you do, you may be able to prise them back in with a set of tweezers, like I just had to do there. I slightly bent it out of shape with my fingers crouched onto it. But as a result, it wasn't a complicated build as such. The last part of the mast is debating whether to put on now or not, because I'm notorious for breaking these off because there's such a thin stem of plastic on the very top. But I decided just to put it on anyway and see how I go. So that's the mast built. Now I've decided to put in the rigging now. When to put it in is entirely up to the builder really. But I'm using this fishing line, and it's a thicker fishing line than I normally would use. The stuff I've got, the easy line, I have various thicknesses from £6, £8, £10 and £12 weights, and so on. This one I'm using a larger £17 one because I wanted the cable to be thick as possible. So I've cut various lengths of this cable and line, and all I'm doing is putting a little bit of super glue on the underside of the mast. It looks like it's the top side, but it's actually upside down, and then just attaching the line just by pushing it into the super glue. This will take a good hour or so to dry before I can handle it again. There's 16 in total to do, and I find this the easier way to do it than having the mass in situ. And that's all in place now, and I'll just leave it to one side and let it dry thoroughly. I'm going back to the main island now and placing on the last deck, the uppermost deck. This goes on to the actual bridge windows. There you can see the glint of the lights, the windows are getting displayed quite nicely there. It just adds a nice little level of detail. Why they don't supply clear plastic for this, I don't know. Probably cost. Now I can start attaching all the pieces around it. So this is the low-level radar system I'm going on. I've actually got the unit upside down here when I'm placing on, just so that I know I've got an exact fit. There's quite a lot of parts to attach to the island. A lot of them are small as well. I mean, what I'm attaching here, they're like little cleats you've got on a gunwale of a ship. Um, but in between them, there's the landing guide radar that I'm placing in as well. And each one does have its own location point. So it's quite easy to follow. It's just that it's fiddly what trying to get everything all lined up. I couldn't place these on before the assembly because as I assembled the panels, my fingers would have crushed into them and broken them off. So it's better on these parts to assemble them once all the panels are in place. And I decided the best way to approach it was just do one side at a time. Put everything on the one particular side that you're working on before going around and completing the next side. So this is the double platform that I made up earlier, just going in. As I said, the instructions sort of hint that you put the bottom one and then the top part, but it's easier just to fit the whole unit once it's assembled. And this is another lower altitude radar system. This one is one of the stranger angles. It goes inside the L-shaped part of the tower. There's two to go on here. Make sure that you put the top one on first before placing on the bottom one. After some dry fitting, you would think the bottom one should go on first, but it was just easier to put the top one on, then the bottom one can slide in underneath it. And then for the next side, it's more landing guide radars and little bits and pieces going on. Just above the windows, you can see all the location points for each part. So they are well defined, as I keep on saying. So fitting them isn't an issue as such. It's just the size that can be awkward. Even though it's a 1350 kit, these parts can be very small. And it should go without saying as well. Be careful when you're placing your cement on. You only want very small amounts and put it inside the location hole itself with a tiny little bit maybe on the upper part where it's going to contact the panels, particularly this part here. There's a guard area that I'm putting on. Move on to the next one once one part is semi-dried as well. Don't put it on straight away because you're liable to knock whatever you put on off. But if it's semi-dry, it should stay in place, and if you do move it, it's easy enough to maneuver back into position. This structure in place on here, there's actually two parts to it, and it's a strange angle as well. Now this will form an anchor point for the actual rigging, and it goes at an acute angle. So you may wish to leave this off until you put the mast on and the rigging is sorted out. That's what I did. I dry fitted it, and I knew I wasn't sure of the exact angle, so I thought I'd better leave it off until I put the mast on. So I just carried on putting all the little bits and pieces around the island itself. And I'm putting on the last of the altitude warning systems. Again, nice location point for this, and it's just pushed on into the side part of the panel. There's a small area that has to be painted here. I'm using Tamiya's X7 red for this. I'm not sure whether the red is the right colour. I do paint over it later on in the build, but I'll get to that. It's only a small dot of paint. And here I'm touching another radar platform. There's a lot of radar systems on this tower. So I think I've figured out the angle of this arm, so I'm placing it in now. There's only a tiny amount of cement on it, so I may have to change it later on, but I think I'll be okay. So the bottom half's on, and now I'm just placing on the top half. I did think about using this as a sub-assembly, but to get the proper angle of these two parts to marry up, um, I think it's better just to build it on the actual island itself. And it says it must be again some sort of radar system that I'm placing in. I deliberately left these parts until last because of the nature of them. There's a chance you can knock them off or snap them. And there's a few more aerials that are going on around the platform also. And now once they're on and able to fit the flight controls center, this it's got quite a large location point for it to sit in, and it just goes on the corner part of above the bridge. There's another radar that sits inside the catwalk of the bridge. Fit that now before you fit anything else. Otherwise, you may find it difficult to get into it. And then more tiny little masts going in. So there is a hell of a lot going on here. As I said before, it's a lot of small bits, but it all makes up to be quite an impressive island. So I'm just carrying on fitting these little bits and pieces around. There's too many, honestly, to mention. Mainly because I don't know the actual names of them as well. So I would be giving you information that I'm just making up, really, and there's no point of that. So all these little bits and pieces are fitted in the same manner. A little bit of cement in the location point, and then adding the actual part itself with my tweezers. It's all self-explanatory, really. And now I can fit one of the main radars. This is a three-dimensional radar that they're calling it. It's quite a large unit compared to everything else that's going on the island. And then the long-range radar on the opposite side. I'm using Tamiya's X24 clear yellow here to overpaint the little red dot that I painted in earlier. I'll just tone down the brightness of the red, and I'll give it a sort of glacier look. It's now time to fit the main mast. Now this can only go in one way. The location point inside the deck is such that it will only fit in one way. My biggest problem here is making sure the cables are not going to get tangled up as I place it in. Now it's time to attach the cables to their anchor points. Now there's various anchor points around here. The instruction tells you exactly where to put them, so you don't have to try and figure it out yourself. This is still quite difficult. My problem was I didn't think about it at the time. Should have used maybe a different line. Was I didn't want to pull these two taut, and just in case I bent the mast. Maybe I should have attached them to the island first, then to the mast. I don't know. But the upshot is they're not as taut as I would have liked them. In fact, some of them sag a little bit too much. I'm going to live with it, but they should have been tighter, in my opinion. But that's how these things go. I don't mind. Well, it's annoying when these things happen. It is easy fixed if I decide to fix it. But at the moment, I've just left it. So what I'm doing is I'm placing a little bit of super glue behind this radar system, and then just pushing in the cable, well, the line, and pulling it as tight as I dare. Even though I'm using super glue to attach these, it will still take quite a while for them to set and get into the proper position. So I'm going around just attaching each cable to an anchor point. I'm using the arm here that I placed in earlier on. That's the one with slight angle for the next cable. This is in fact where you're meant to place it. It's not just for that it's a convenient spot. But as I said, this takes a bit of time to do. As I'm attaching them, this is where I'll end part 13. Now, there's a lot longer video than I initially planned, but I wanted to get all this in the one video. If I split the video, it would have been two very short ones, so I decided just to keep it as a slightly longer video. So if you haven't done so already, why don't you check out the channel for my other builds? If you subscribe to the channel, make sure you hit the notification bell. That way you'll be kept up to date not only with this build, but all my other builds as well, of course. Hit the like button, don't be afraid to leave a comment, and of course you can share the video. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Bye bye.